Our next guest has a very interesting story to tell. He is Brooke Macdonald, CEO of Cornerstone Capital Resources, ticker CGP on the Venture Exchange. Brooke, I want to thank you so much for being on Kitco today and sponsoring our channel.
Thank you for having me on, David.
Let's start with an update on Cornerstone. So there's an interesting backstory about Cornerstone and the project Cascabel. Tell us about that.
Well, Cascabel, David, is in northwest Ecuador. And Ecuador has become quite a destination for mining in recent years. The Cascabel concession contains probably the largest gold-enriched copper porphyry discovery not controlled by a major in the world. We own 21.4% of it. The deposit on Cascabel is called Alpala. It's a tier 1 asset. There's over 21 million ounces of gold, 21 billion pounds of copper, and 92 million ounces of silver in the measured and indicated resource category, 2/3 of that in the measured category. The high-grade core alone at Alpala has over 12 million ounces of gold and over 8 billion pounds of copper, and only about 50% of the targets on Cascabel have been drilled so far. So there's a lot of blue sky in this project, and it's going to be a multi-generational project.
So some major companies have taken notice, Bhp, Newcrest, for example. Can you tell us about that as well?
Correct. Bhp and Newcrest Mining. Well, Bhp, as you know, is the largest mining company in the world, and Newcrest is the largest gold producer in Australia. And each of them own 13.6% of our partner and the operator of the project, SolGold. And recently, Franco-Nevada, the royalty company, has provided $100 million in funding to SolGold for feasibility study, and in return for a 1% net smelter return interest on SolGold's share of the project. Our 21.4% of the project is comprised of a 15% direct carried interest, which is carried through to completion of a bankable feasibility study and repayable out of our share of project earnings or dividends at LIBOR plus 2%, a very cheap cost of capital for us. Plus, we own 7.6% of SolGold. So we have a larger interest than either BHP or Newcrest Mining in the project.
Okay. Now, I did mention there's a very interesting backstory to your project. How did you come about the property?
Well, Cornerstone has been in Ecuador since 2005. I think we've probably been there longer than almost anyone. So we had a first mover advantage. We acquired Cascabel back in 2011. And Cornerstone was the operator of the project in the beginning. We did all the environmental permitting, and we operated it right through the discovery hole number 5 in February and March 2014, when we intersected over 1.3 kilometers of greater than 1% copper equivalent. And that was quickly followed by a succession of some of the best copper porphyry holes in the world. We had multiple holes grading greater than 1 kilometer of greater than 1% copper equivalent. We handed the project over to SolGold in 2014, in September 2014, pursuant to an earn-in agreement.
So now there are 2 players in this project, as you've explained, but Cornerstone has repelled takeover attempts from SolGold before. Can you tell the investors why?
Yes. SolGold first announced an intention to make a hostile bid against Cornerstone at the end of January last year. And then about 16 months later, finally this summer, they pulled the trigger on it. It is an underwhelming offer. We were immediately notified by over 65% of our shareholders that they were not in favor of it. So the offer was dead on arrival, and it has zero chance of succeeding. And I'll tell you why it undervalues Cornerstone. SolGold is offering us about 1.4 cents per pound of copper equivalent resource versus about 7 cents a pound in precedent transactions, or about 5 times less. It's an all-share offer, no cash, and the exchange ratio gives us would give us about 14.7% of the project versus the 21.4% that we now own. Another reason SolGold is an illiquid stock. So Cornerstone shareholders would have a very hard time trading out of it if they wanted to go to cash. Paradigm Capital of Toronto, our independent financial advisor, has told us that the offer is inadequate from a financial point of view. And SolGold has not provided a formal valuation, which is required under Canadian securities law, as they are a deemed insider of Cornerstone, managing our flagship asset and keeping us in the dark about material developments like the work streams on the pre-feasibility study. And finally, Cornerstone has a unique position of interest to any potential acquirer of Cascabel. So we're not going to sell the company cheap. So I would encourage everyone to read our July 14th, 2020 news release, which goes into detail on all these reasons.
So then tell us about the stake in Cascabel vis-a-vis SolGold and the message you have for investors who are interested in looking at your company.
David, we traded at a discount to SolGold. We've come up, closed the gap quite a bit in recent days, but we're still trading at more than a 10% discount. As a general rule of thumb, when SolGold trades on the London Stock Exchange at around 27 pence, we should be around Canadian dollars and $6.50. I think today we're trading around $5.75. So we're significantly undervalued. We're also trading below the $8.60 Canadian that our top three shareholders paid when they swapped their SolGold shares for Cornerstone about 3 years ago. BHP's price for their block of SolGold would imply $11 Canadian a share for Cornerstone. Newcrest price for their last block would imply $13 a share for Cornerstone. And as I mentioned, the precedent transactions at 7 cents a pound copper equivalent would imply $18 a share for Cornerstone, or over 3 times our current price.
There's an important date coming up for your company. Tell the investors what they should be looking forward to. What should they be getting excited for?
Sure. On October 19th, BHP will become free of a standstill agreement that they have under their share subscription agreement with SolGold. The standstill prevents them from buying Cornerstone unless a third party bids for us first, which would spring BHP or release them from their standstill. There's a separate standstill they agreed to that prevents them from buying SolGold or voting to change the SolGold board, which we have announced an intention to do. So after October 19th, BHP will be free to talk to Cornerstone about our 21.4% interest and join us in efforts to change the SolGold board to create a board that will act in the best interests of all shareholders and stop breaching their agreements with Cornerstone.
The investors are also wondering, because not everybody has a background in geology, they're also wondering how an experienced mining executive like yourself has prepared your assets for potential acquisition down the line. Can you walk us through just a summary of how one goes about preparing an asset from drilling to exploration to expanding the asset and finally acquisition? What's that timeline like?
Sure. In Cornerstone's case, we're what they call a prospect generator following the joint venture model. We typically prospect for properties and acquire the concessions. And then we work the concessions doing all the initial geological, geochemical, and geophysical work to identify coincident anomalies. And when they line up on the maps, the coincident anomalies become your drill targets. And then we usually look for a partner with deeper pockets to fund the drilling, because drilling is expensive. And as you know, in the mining business, you can, I think the general rule is you can explore 1,000 properties to get to 5 feasibility studies and 1 operating mine. So it's a bit of a hit or miss business. So to avoid dilution to our shareholders, we look for a funding partner. And then the funding partner takes over, and as they spend money and do work, they earn an increasing interest in the project. and we like to negotiate for ourselves a carried interest. And so typically the partner would, if there is a discovery made, then they would proceed to do a mineral resource estimate. And then after that would follow a preliminary economic assessment, a pre-feasibility study, a feasibility study, et cetera. And at that point, you would likely attract the interest of a major or major mining companies. And this is pretty much what has happened with Cascabel.
Sure. Finally, Brooke, I have one last question. We've seen an influx of new generalist investors into the space this year. What message do you have to these new investors who are looking to invest? What should they be looking out for not just your company, for the industry?
Well, I think both there are tailwinds behind both the gold price because of all the because interest rates are going to be lower for longer, and there has been a lot of money creation, and so I think gold has a lot of support under it as well. The copper price has finally come back over $3 a pound and looks. If you believe in electric vehicles, and I know I drive a Tesla myself, all the projections are that that's the way that the car business will go in the future, and they take a lot more copper than a combustion engineering vehicle. As well, there will be a lot of infrastructure programs both in China and the United States eventually. And that will use a lot of copper. So I would encourage people if you're looking for a company to add to your portfolio of juniors, I would encourage you to take a look at Cornerstone.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brooke. Continued success to you and your company. Thank you for coming on Kitco.
Thanks very much, David.
Thank you for watching Kitco News. We'll have more for you. Stay tuned.